The plants that I am growing for next week's plant sale send their greetings to you this morning. I found myself in dialogue with them last night as I was finishing up this sermon, especially the cute little basil plants with their two-sided leaves. Yesterday, I also had a chance for a very brief dialogue with the ocean, saying thanks for those who are healing and also adding a little salinity and sorrow because this world is what it is. At any rate, I bring you a sermon this morning, plant approved and ocean blessed. Sometimes we all need to touch something sacred, either in the large or small manifestations. Especially now when we've been living in a world of scarcity. And yes, I'm talking about the last year, the year we're just coming out of, where we were hungry for company and experiences, hungry for comfort and free will. And I'm also talking about the years that go on beyond that, the decades in which we have gradually, like the frog in the pot, become convinced by those who profit from these decisions that everything should be about our own pleasure, about creating and living in bubbles of comfort. Consumption-based, hyper-capitalist culture has changed our lives in ways we don't even know. In this week in which we noted both Earth Day, a day that is more and more sobering each year, and also tried to take into our hearts the conflicting realities around a verdict that convicted Derek Chauvin of murder and also brought us more killings, fueling unease and anger about our broken systems or lack of systems. Well, it was a week in which we could use some larger frame. Times like these challenge us to be in dialogue with what is larger than ourselves and what it is that within that frame we aspire to do and how we are guided by it. The questions we ask ourselves amid an era that shows no end of becoming more certain, ending its turbulence or its unpredictability, or defying our known answers. These questions become more important. There's so much going on with economic shifts and climate change and an unwillingness for those who have been suffering at the hands of our systems to sit quietly and allow their lives to be taken. It is important that we are focused on a broader sense of rights and not just property rights for some. And so as Unitarian Universalists, we need to think about taking some time to explore, as Jim Lincoln said, not just what we don't believe and how we're right in that disbelief, but to worry our way through the much larger quagmire, a million voices or more, we hope, of what it is we do believe. What we don't believe is often a way we bond among us, and yet in a world with so much we can't unknow, unbelief offers very little sustenance. Offered a chance to think about what we do think about as the forces or force beyond us and in relationship with us, we often are without words, without easy answers. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer invites us into the mutuality with all life from the ethics of her Potawatomi people. And as a trained scientist, a botanist, she does so with an embracing simplicity and complexity which honors relationship, reciprocity, renewal, and restoration. Perhaps it is easier to talk about what we've rejected because what we seek has so many names among us. Some of us call it God, and we also esteem those who believe that the most important part are those who are in a larger dialogue with that God, human beings with a sense of vision, such as Hillel or Jesus or Muhammad. For some of us, it's all about that greater force of creativity and possibility and healing, which has less of a human face and yet more of a mysterious nature, a process we sometimes call synchronicity or creativity or goddess or love. For others, it is the aspirations of the community, whether we call it beloved or sangha. For many of us, as I mentioned last week, it's human community and human endeavors, which are in fact the larger frame to which we are accountable. for many of us. The divine and the sacred are found in the splendor and the magnitude of the natural world. Whatever form of divinity speaks to us, our traditions are clear. They suggest mutual relationship, not top-down, one-sided, or absolutely resolved relationships, but evolving and continuing and living relationships. And this is true about our beliefs in human community. When we speak of our higher power as community, for example, it is a particular kind of community that is bound to aspiration, one caught in the network of mutuality that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of, and was also captured in the words of the great Jewish scholar and theologian Martin Buber, who believed that we find the holy and the sacred in the I-thou relationships, where we can both perceive what each of us bring to that relationship. For those of us who find our great comfort in the natural world, in the world of great expanse of sky and solidity of earth, we know that it is also in our relationship and choices towards that world as well. Whatever it is that we consider to be divine, we can consider it as a world of abundance and not a world of scarcity. The earth-based traditions, as Kimmerer reminds us, are not anti-science. In fact, in truth, they combine the story of a people's observations over time through the natural cycles of days or years and seasons with what is believed about good choices. The great turning of Mother Earth that the indigenous people heard and held sacred says that we can live in great reciprocity and a sense of renewal with that very earth and nature. Perhaps it's important for us to be reminded that many of us feel that larger presence in a combination of these things, a sort of glorious, intoxicating kind of cocktail of the many forms. I know that is my own personal sense of this spirituality. My lanky cilantro plants in their recycled plastic six-packs aren't quite as sacred as Kirmer's engagement with the Potawatomi's sacred sweetgrass. And yet she found her way back into her indigenous heritage through very mundane rituals that her father made up on camping trips that involved nothing more sacred than the battered coffee pot and a few words said before drinking the first libations of the day. We can learn to live, she reminds us, in great reciprocity and with a sense of renewal, with traditions that we have inherited or new traditions that we find, when we are bound to a vision of something that is larger than ourselves and that is beyond just being a social network or seeing nature as just an outdoor playground, something that takes what is beyond our own needs and thinks about it in terms of the greater needs of all life. In this sense, we have the ability to be bound anew in new traditions. Martin Buber says, the dialectic is not to be identified with love, but love without dialogue, without real outgoing to the other, reaching the other, love remaining with itself, that is called Lucifer. Now, I will tell you that my first pet ever in this life was a cat named Lucifer, and well, you just really don't want that, I promise you. While Robin Wall Kimmerer helps us see all of this in her book, we can also set aside, she says, the divide that we have to either be concerned about the natural world or with human community. I have been thinking for the last couple years that somehow we need to collapse our first and seventh principle, which affirms the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and the seventh, our part in the interdependent web of all life, that we should collapse those and hold those in a dialogue together, because that would embrace the worth and dignity of all life. We could live into this world in this way. We could begin to see the impacts of our actions and understand what they mean. In May, I will be starting a new class for us to explore some modes of thinking about what we do hold sacred, not what we don't. A chance for us to talk through some of the different ways of perceiving the divine. And at the very end, we're going to have a discussion of braiding sweetgrass. So you have a month to read it if you want to. It's well worth it. One of the themes that runs through it is that there is that dialogue of reciprocity and no conflict between the various wisdom traditions. She says science and traditional language may ask different questions and speak different languages, but they converge when one truly listens to the plant. The question is, how do we show respect to all life? Sweetgrass tells us the answer. The grass gives its fragrant self to us, and we receive it with gratitude. In return, by receiving and accepting the gift, we open some space by picking the grass. Let the light come in and let the dormant buds make new grass. Reciprocity is a matter of keeping the gift in motion through cycles of giving and receiving. No matter what we call it, mystery, God, Great Spirit, beloved community, or Gaia, we also know that our relationships must be sustained in this reciprocity and that we can hold them in a sense of deep abundance. I'm glad we will be sharing plants with one another next week, sharing from our own resources of time, talent, and treasure. Glad that we can hold together both the sacred and the everyday documentable. We can live in gratitude with a great open-hearted spirit that allows us to see that we are living in a place where there is great bounty despite scarcity, a place where we can be renewed to that spirit of peace with which we opened our service, a greater sense that we can serve our own being and the lives of those around us. For this affirmation is in itself a great prayer, and in this way we affirm the abundance of divinity that is all around us.